Hiya. Today we're going to have a look at my Rega Planar 3, which I've had since 1996 or thereabouts. I've done quite a lot of work on it, just trying to get the most from it really, and I was never fully satisfied with it. I wasn't getting the best from it at all. So first thing to look at, I've changed the mat for cork. Tried a couple of options and I found that works quite well. I like the sound of it. It's certainly a lot better than the felt mats that of course everybody gets with their turntable usually. This was an expensive item. I mean, cork's a fairly cheap material, but it certainly does, do the job. It's about a couple of mil thick. That's all you really need. I'm currently using the original glass platter. I haven't yet gone to acrylic. It's something I might do later. Everybody says that acrylic's the way to go. It's very much heavier and deader. And I certainly find that the glass does still ring. My next thing I'm going to try is actually to put an elastic band all the way around the circumference and see if that'll soak up any ringing that it might have. So if I lift that off, which is quite difficult, and that'll become clear in a minute, there is still a slight ring tone from that. The next layer below, I've changed the original sub platter, which is plastic with a metal spindle through it, for this, which I think was about £65. There's a gentleman called Patrick, I can't remember his last name, who produces these. Iceni Audio, I think, ICENI Audio is his trading name. Now he himself says that sub-platters don't make a great deal of difference in terms of the sound. What they do bring is a level of accuracy that you can't get with the moulded plastic with the spindle just shoved through. So from that perspective it's worth thinking about. There's several variations of this. I like this particular one because he's taken the thought to produce these teardrop shaped cuts, which I would imagine help greatly with losing any ringing that you get on the sub-platter. I will say that any motor and bearing noise that you might have present suddenly becomes a lot more noticeable when you put a metal sub-platter on. The original plastic one does actually do a great job of deadening any bearing or motor noise, and I did notice a noise when I had this installed, and I wasn't very happy with that, but it turned out that eventually, after a lot of faffing about, it was my motor that was failing and that noise was coming through. But if you got any problems like that, you will notice them more with a metal sub-platter. The other thing I've done is move to a double pulley, and I've deliberately used two different bands here. So this is the little belter and this is the upgraded Rega belt. And I was really looking for the one to complement the other really. If you put two on of the same type, then they're going to behave in a very similar way. And I just wanted to try having two very different materials on here and see if they balance each other out. I mean, quite honestly, I have no idea. And life's too short to be buying lots of rubber belts and trying them all, but it's worth a go. The other major upgrade on this is this red bracket here, which I've manufactured and fitted myself. So this is a metal plate that you can get from your local DIY store. It's all pre-drilled. I did have to drill this central hole larger. I actually destroyed a motor and a spindle because I was too lazy to drill a large enough hole, and then I glued it all together, and then it was wrong, and then I broke it getting out again when I had to. Now the construction of the Regas, certainly from this period, this is just particle board, or what we in Britain call chip board, covered with a phenolic resin. So that's what gives you this nice finish, and nowadays these are available in all sorts of colours. I don't recall being offered a choice back in '96. It was basically black or nout. However, there is a cut in the chipboard. It's routed out. It's a square about sort of vaguely here-ish, which contains the electronics for the motor and the motor, but it's actually routed all the way through the chip, and it's only this resin layer that is used to suspend the motor from two bolt points. So you had your two bolt points, you had a metal plate, which I'll get. So you had a metal motor on the, a metal plate on the underside. You can see the screws there, and then that had a rubber belt on which the motor would be suspended. And in later versions they moved to a direct mount on a Silberthane plate, which is what I've done with this turntable. It's not worth taking this thing apart to show you something that you can't even see, but basically I've got another plate, another metal plate underneath the phenolic resin, so these two bolts clamp those two plates together, and these two bolts then go all the way through the motor as well, and then there's a couple of bolts underneath that hold the motor up nice and rigidly, so the whole thing's clamped together fairly tightly. Not so tightly as it would negate the Silberthane from doing its job, but tightly enough that it's pretty stiff and stable. And the two plates together, the phenolic resin was actually warping, which I wasn't happy about. So the two plates together really clamp that resin nice and bring it back to the original sort of profile that it should have had, particularly as this plate here bridges beyond the cut in the chip. The other thing I've done is you'll notice this brace here, which is something that is done on the modern planar 3s, but this being a version from '96 didn't have it, so it's something I bought, laser cut, very cheap, another eBay or Amazon purchase. And then the other thing I've done, if I just rotate round slightly, sorry for the wobbling, just about see there, that's an adjustable height, vertical tracking alignment. Now it is possible to buy washers so that you can raise the height of the arm. This is quite important as you change cartridges, because cartridge bodies are different heights. But I didn't want to be dismantling my arm every time I put on a thicker record maybe, or change the cartridge. Not something I do very often, but you know. But I wanted an easy way of getting the vertical tracking alignment correct. So having an adjustable height was a real benefit. The one downside though is that I then had to make the hole in this plate larger, because it simply wouldn't fit. It was never designed for that. So I spent quite a lot of time with a file getting that right. But it's pretty accurate, and does the job of bracing the centre spindle against the tone arm mount. The other change I've made is the counterweight here is not the original. That would have been a solid steel disc, and Iceni Audio make this very nice, very pretty steel and brass counterweight that's very low slung. The idea is to bring the weight as low as possible, more in line with the cartridge, although this is actually lower. But yes, it's sort of a counterweight upgrade, which is very popular with the modding community for these turntables. And the other thing that I did, which I can't really show you, but I can describe, within the counterweight adjustment here, there's a spring. It's a coil spring, and those who've bothered to try have put a stethoscope on this and tapped the arm, and the coil spring will actually ring. Interestingly, a lot of clocks use exactly that same mechanism to produce the boing. If you get a clock with a boing rather than a ting, it's using a spring rather than a bell. So what I did for this is I got some cloth and I just wound it in with the spring to damp the spring out. The cartridge body I'm using is a gold ring. I apologise again for the wobbling. It's a gold ring, currently 1042. This started life as a 1012, but the great thing about gold ring is that you can just buy a different diamond and get a better performance. I think these styli are about 240. I managed to get one for 180, which I was very pleased with. But yes, it's a really nice, it does make a difference. The other thing I've done, it's going to be difficult to show quite honestly. Yeah, not going to happen. I've actually drilled the underside of that arm. So there's a series of holes all the way along the underside. And the idea with that was to prevent the arm from ringing, so it just deadens any resonances out from the arm. And then finally, on the arm, I've changed the internal wiring. I had already changed this for oxygen-free copper Litz cable. Litz is usually the gold standard. It's very flexible, very fine, produces a nice sound. But I wasn't happy with the result, particularly where it joins the cartridge body. So I thought I'd move to silver because it's actually not a lot of money. And what I did was I bought a sufficient length that it comes all the way along the arm and then down the body as usual, but then I've actually removed the original cabling. So this would originally have had the Rega cable that just ties onto the underside and then out, which is all very well, but I like the option to change my phono cables for something rather nicer. I had already asked the shop at the time of purchase in '96 to change to decent quality gold plugs because the originals were just steel. But as I was changing the cable anyway, I thought I'd go for something very different. So you will see here that there is some shrink wrap over the silver cables, and it enters this box, which again was about 18 or 20 quid from Analog Seduction, I think it was. And that then gives you a proper twin phono breakout with your earthing point, and that earthing point is actually attached to the very front, excuse me, of the arm just in here. Oh, sorry, I'm afraid you can see my scratching with my drill slipped slightly. I haven't bothered tightening it up, who cares? So, it doesn't affect the sound, you can usually never see it. So yeah, so then I can attach any cable I want, and more importantly, the arm is properly earthed. From the factory in '96, they may do things differently now. The earth was just a connection to the ground of the left-hand channel at the base of the arm, whereas I've taken a wire all the way through. I actually used one of the old copper Litz cables and actually attached it to the very front, right next to the head shell, so that's very nicely grounded now. The other change you'll notice underneath is that it's got this foam attached to it. Now my thinking here, and I mean I haven't done any modelling, there is no science, my thinking here is that if there are any vibrations coming from the underside of the turntable, then this should sort of damp it down quite nicely. This is a very cheap upgrade. You just buy it on a roll, cut it more or less to size and stick it on. Being grey, it doesn't look terribly out of place. I mean, obviously you can see it, but if you're more worried about sound quality than you are about overall aesthetics, then, you know, it's fine. And then the other thing I've done is I've changed the feet. So these are actually Sorbothane feet. I'm then using washers for height adjustment because there is no height adjustment on this table. And then I have got, these are old steel feet that used to be for spikes, which I've then reused with these Sorbothane feet, and they themselves have a Sorbothane disc attached to the base of them, so that you get very, very good deadening between the surface upon which the turntable rests and the actual turntable itself. And this is enormously effective. This usually lives on an old mid-century coffee table on a suspended wooden floor. And certainly when I used to walk past it, you could hear the thumps of my feet coming through to the needle. And sometimes the needle would jump on particularly, bad if I'm having a heavy day. Whereas now, you can walk past it and it's not a problem, and the change in the sound quality is profound. The Sorbothane was by far and away the single greatest change I've made to this turntable. On which note, I have also put Sorbothane dots on this metal subplatter, which has made another vast difference to the quality of the sound. I spoke to Patrick at IC New Audio, and well, it's safe to say he wasn't a fan of the idea. I suggested to him he might like to actually try it and then see how big a fan he is, but he seemed against it. However, I've pressed ahead and done it, and I must say that it's just transformed. There is now so much isolation on this turntable. Everything's isolated from everything else, that it really does produce a fantastic sound. Now, there's no point me trying to record it and play it through here. There's copyright issues, and besides which, my system will not sound like your system. But my lodger, who quite likes music himself, he noticed the difference in the sound quality. He noticed just how much better it was as a result of all of this work that I've done. So, yes, the Rega 3, very good turntable, very well regarded. Inevitably, they do right up to the Rega 10, so there are differences to be had. But I've looked at the upper scale turntables, and the feet that they use on this one, they seem to still use on the higher higher end stuff. Just they disguise them. They're not high tech foot in the way that Sorbothane is a high tech material. So, and it's not actually a lot of money. If you're spending hundreds of pounds more for your turntable, I'm very surprised that they don't use Sorbothane anywhere. So anyway, so I have no idea what these go for. I think it's £500 or £600 these days with the regular Rega cartridge, whatever they fitted. But I remember back in '96, the original Rega cartridge I was not happy with, which is why we went to the 1012 originally, which is subsequently I've upgraded to the 1042. The other one I've forgotten about, at the bottom of this bearing well, there is actually a ceramic bearing. I'm not entirely sure on that upgrade personally, but it's such a faff to get it out that I'm minded to just not worry about it. It does spin. I might at some point put the steel one back in and see how that goes. You can get ruby as well. The ceramic bearing I bought, I'm not actually sure it was that round. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure just how much spinning they do. I think it's more about just suspending it off the brass surface. So I don't know. But anyway, so that's that basically. That's everything I've done, and I must say it's made a world of difference. It's transformed what was a quite good sound into a really good sound. I've just torn through my entire record collection, listening to everything again, and there's just so much more detail. And in actual fact, none of these things was individually particularly expensive to do. You add it all up, there's a couple of £100 here probably, but the difference between a Rega 3 and a Rega 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever they do, is vast. So you can get a really nice sound out of this comparatively low end table with just putting a bit of sweat equity in it, and it makes such a difference. Anyway, hope that helps somebody out. Thanks a lot.